The wind rolled across the barren prairie like a restless spirit, carrying dust, echoes of thunder, and the faint cry of a dying coyote. The sun had drowned hours ago beneath the horizon, leaving behind a cold so sharp it sliced through leather and bone alike. Jesse Cole pulled his coat tighter, his horse snorting steam into the dark. He'd been riding for 3 days, following no real path, just the ache in his heart and the guilt that trailed him like a shadow he could never outpace. Once, men had feared the name Jesse Cole. Gunslinger, outlaw, killer. The kind of man whose eyes never softened, whose hand never hesitated. But those days had burned out like spent cartridges. Now he was just a man wandering between sins and silence. Lightning cracked across the sky, revealing a small campfire in the distance, its flicker trembling in the storm's breath. Jesse hesitated. Folks this far out were either desperate or dangerous, and sometimes both. But the horse beneath him stumbled, weary, and his own hunger gnawed harder than his caution. He nudged the reins and rode toward the glow. As he approached, the shape by the fire barely looked human, thin, cloaked in rags, trembling as the wind howled. He dismounted quietly, hand hovering near his revolver. The figure lifted its head, and even through the blur of rain and ash, he saw her face. Clara. He froze, every muscle locking tight. The name struck him like a bullet. Clara McHale. The wife of Ethan McHale. The man Jesse had killed 3 winters ago in a gunfight that still haunted his dreams. Jesse remembered the man's dying breath, the plea rasped through blood and dust. If you ever see her again, don't hurt her. Now here she was, pale and hollow-eyed, her beauty worn thin by hunger and grief. She saw him, too. For a moment, neither moved. Only the wind spoke, dragging the firelight across their faces. Then her hand lifted, clutching a rifle that looked too heavy for her frail arms. Don't, she croaked. Don't come closer. Her voice broke halfway through the words. Jesse saw how her fingers trembled, saw the bruised dark circles beneath her eyes, the cracked skin at her lips. The storm had not been kind to her. Clara. His voice was low, almost swallowed by the wind. You shouldn't be out here. Her knees wavered as she tried to stand, the rifle clattering to the ground. She took one step toward him, then another, her breath coming in sharp gasps before her strength gave out completely. Jesse lunged forward and caught her before she hit the dirt. Her skin burned with fever. She was all bones beneath the torn dress, lighter than he remembered, fragile in a way that frightened him. You, she tried to speak, but the words tangled with a dry cough. You should have let me die. Jess's grip tightened. Ain't my way. A ghost of a bitter smile touched her lips. It was once. That cut deep. He didn't argue. He couldn't. He just looked at her. This woman who had every reason to hate him. And for a moment, the past bled into the present like a slow-moving wound. He carried her closer to the fire, laid her down on a blanket that smelled of rain and smoke. She was shivering hard now, whispering half-thought words about her husband, about a child that never lived to see spring. Jesse fed the fire, letting the warmth crawl back into the circle of light. Rest, he said quietly, brushing the damp hair from her forehead. You're safe now. She opened her eyes again, just long enough to look at him, really look, and there it was, that flicker of disbelief, of memory, of hate tangled with something softer. Her lips parted, voice barely a breath. You should have let me die, Jesse Cole. You owe me that much. His throat tightened. The storm outside raged, but inside, the silence was louder. No, he said finally, voice rough as gravel. Not anymore. And as thunder rolled across the plains, The cowboy held the enemy's starving wife in his arms, not knowing whether he'd just saved her life or doomed his own again. The dawn came slow over the plains, bleeding pale light through the tattered remains of the storm. The fire had died down to glowing coals, and the wind had softened into a whisper that carried the scent of wet earth and wild sage. Jesse sat beside Clara, his hat tilted low, revolver resting in the dirt beside him. He hadn't slept. Couldn't. Not with the ghost of her husband's voice still echoing in his head. Clara stirred, eyes fluttering open like a wounded bird testing its wings. Her face was softer in the morning light, though exhaustion still clung to every line. She blinked, disoriented, then focused on the man beside her. "You stayed," she murmured, her voice barely more than a rasp. "Didn't have anywhere better to be," he said, his tone dry but gentle. She tried to sit up, but the effort made her wince. Jesse reached forward instinctively, steadying her by the shoulders. She flinched at his touch, and for a heartbeat, the air between them went cold again. "You don't have to pretend," she whispered. "You think I'm just another ghost you owe something to." Jesse sighed, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Maybe I do. Maybe that's all I got left to pay." She studied him in silence, her expression unreadable. The man sitting beside her wasn't the gunslinger she remembered from the stories, the killer who'd ridden into town and left her husband bleeding in the dust. This Jesse looked older, worn down by regret. The steel in his eyes had dulled, replaced by something heavy and human. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why save me? You could have walked away." He hesitated, his jaw tightening. "'Cause I promised him," he said finally. "Promised who?" "Ethan." Her breath caught. "My husband." He nodded once. "Before he died, he asked me to find you if I ever could. Said you'd have no one left." Tears welled up in her eyes before she could stop them. "And now you've kept your promise," she said bitterly. "You can leave." Jesse didn't answer. Instead, he reached for the tin cup beside the fire, filled it with water, and held it out to her. "Drink." Her trembling hands hesitated before she took it. She sipped slowly, her throat working, and when she looked up again, there was something different in her gaze. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a fragile thread of understanding. "I don't need your mercy," she said quietly. He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Ain't mercy," he murmured. "Just decency." For a while, neither spoke. The prairie stretched endless and empty around them, the silence broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. Then Clara's voice came again, trembling, almost childlike. "Please, don't hurt me again." Jesse turned to her, his heart twisting at the fear behind the words. He knew she wasn't just talking about him. She meant the world, the pain, the loss, the endless betrayal of hope. He reached out, slow and steady, and this time she didn't pull away. His hand brushed hers, warm against the cold. "I won't," he said simply. And for the first time since the storm began, the wind outside seemed to quiet, as if even the land itself believed him.